Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. In today's video we'll be taking a look at the Commonwealth ORBAT in this deep dive. To make these deep dives a bit more friendly for new players, I've also ordered all of the units not in alphabetical orders like the normal ORBATs do, but according to what sprues or boxes they can be found in, so you can make a better decision when you decide to build your models. If you like this new approach and think it was useful in any way, make sure you give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more of this content, because it's coming for every single faction. Before we start discussing any units, however, let's first take a look at the unique special rules for the Commonwealth that make them their faction, that give them their own identity on the tabletop. Some of these rules are not specifically unique to the Commonwealth, but are used so often that I've included them in this list anyway. One such example is the ablative armor rule. This one says that when it is the initial target of an attack, this unit can affect the number of exploding hits results in the attack action die pool up to its mass value. The affecting exploding die hits do not generate additional action dice, however, attacks with a piercing, rail or ramming or submerged qualities ignore this rule. It is sort of a mini version of Shrouded if you will, and it is found on a lot of different cruisers in this ORBAT. There is a slight downside, if you will, but that's more of a luxury problem with this commonly found rule, and that is that shroud generators definitely are not quite as valuable within this faction as this one, because this rule does stack with shield generators, and therefore quite often the better choice is to pair a shield generator with an ablative armor unit to get some extra toughness out of it. Now that's not to say that shroud generators are completely useless within the Commonwealth ORBAT, of course, but it does mean that if you get a good Commonwealth player, he's quickly able to identify these types of units, able to throw massive amounts of dice at you, and if you intervene rather quickly against those, getting those ablative armors to do a lot of heavy lifting for you defensively is quite an important key to winning with this faction. Another defining rule for the Commonwealth is the rail rule, which can be found on, their railguns obviously. It says that the initial target will receive a -1 penalty to their citadel against actions with this quality. Furthermore, when making an attack action against a skimming unit or an aerial unit, each weapon or SRS token with this quality receives +1 action die, with a maximum of +3, because when it comes to SRS tokens, this can really get ridiculous after a while. Also, there is a downside to it, because when making an attack action against models with a submerged unit position trait, you actually lose an action die to a maximum of -3 as well. So they are really good against skimmers and flyers, but quite terrible against submerged units. Now, in the current state of the game, flying units are pretty prevalent and quite dominant as well, so it's not too much of a downside. However, if you get a bit too trigger happy with the upgrade finger in your list, that does mean that you can sort of be left out when an opponent does actually feel quite some nasty submerged units against you. Now, a quick note about the SRS with the rail quality. This is explained in the Cometa railgun rule here. It says that attack runs with the Swordwing SRS tokens or any SRS tokens from this unit gain the rail quality, but that's only against mass 1 targets, and it doesn't apply when making a torpedo attack run. So it's not like the SRS are monstrously more effective against the aerial units. That is largely against their smaller mass 1 variants. Now, these SRS tokens of course also have piercing, meaning that you lower the citadel of your mass 1 targets if they are flying units or skimmer units by a whopping -4, and if you reach that citadel value you instantly one-shot it because it's a mass 1 ship. So basically even a single SRS token from the Commonwealth making it through to a mass 1 flying unit is sometimes enough to actually shoot it down in a single shot. It's quite a strong ability, and it does change the math somewhat to how many SRS tokens you throw at each and every one of those mass 1 ships. Most factions have to send in at least 3 to be sure. With the Commonwealth you can actually toss in a cheeky 2 of them, and sometimes even come out on top against them if their citadel isn't too high. And of course you do not want to do that against units with a very high amount of defense, because that means that your Cometa railguns are going to get shot down rather quickly. Your Cometa SRS are going to get shut down too much if you split it too much. So it's sort of a case of looking at the target and deciding what to do from there on. Commonwealth is also the faction with one of the first available mercenary units being the Black Wolf mercenaries, and they get their own trait. Models with this unit may reroll blank dice results in any action dice pools, which is an immensely strong ability. However, the Black Wolf mercenary rule only applies during each round where the forces in this unit, or that has this unit, has more victory points than their opponent at the most recent check for victory step. And you have to remember, the check for victory step is one of the last ones in the end phase, so you're not getting this bonus in the first round, regardless of what happens through patrons. Another type of iconic unit for the Commonwealth are their Ekranoplans, and they come with a rule that says that the unit only has a drift value of 1 inch, so that makes them slightly more maneuverable, especially the ones with a larger amount of mass. However, these units typically have a very low turn limit, so don't expect to outmaneuver your opponent with them. What they do though, however, is go incredibly fast because they've got the Caspian Overthruster rule, which is denoted with a value X. During its activation, this model may increase the speed by the number of inches indicated by that rule. However, it cannot make any turns during the same activation, so it goes really fast in a straight line. If this model has moved at least 10 inch, and this includes that drift of a single inch, the model also gains the obscured quality, and weapons with the aerial quality gain the extreme range quality if they are found on the model with the Caspian Overthrusters. If the model is crippled or has a navigation lock critical damage marker, this rule cannot be used, however. These Ekranoplan units are incredibly fun to use, however you do have to take in mind that they are about as maneuverable as a brick on the tabletop, and you do want to move them in a straight line to get that obscured bonus, meaning you have to move at least 10 inches, so they are quite difficult to set up, but once they've got a good firing lane on your opponent, they can absolutely wreak havoc because there's a lot of firepower on those units in a small package. A unique bit of kit belonging to the Commonwealth is the Shockwave generator, which means that these generators in a unit can be used in the shooting phase to fire a shockwave pulse at a target model using the shockwave pulse weapon profile. Now we'll be looking at the weapon profiles in a bit, but this is a torrent type of weapon. Each additional generator of this type adds +4 to the action dice pool rather than making separate attacks, so if you've got multiples of them you can get a very big action dice pool. And the template must be placed over the initial target in line of sight anywhere within 10 inch of a model in this unit, provided that the narrow end is pointing directly at the model, so it sort of shoots out that burst, that template, further away from itself, which is incredibly devastating because the problem with these templates is that you have to stick them to the model firing them. If there are 3 or more generators contributing to the attack dice pool, then you get to use the larger torrent template instead of the small one as well, meaning that you can absolutely smoke a lot of mass 1 units in one go. Generators listed, of course, cannot be swapped out if you have them on the unit profile. Now these shockwave units very much are found on a lot of mass 1 ships, the smaller ones, and so if you're facing the Commonwealth, here's a quick tip for you: shoot them down as fast as possible. Make sure that there's no more than 3 of them in a unit, otherwise that can really wreak havoc on your mass 1 units. This of course does not work if the unit also has a sonic amplifier, because attacks made with the hazardous quality, mostly being those shockwave generator qualities by models in this unit, gain +3 to their attack dice pool and a devastating quality. In addition, the shockwave pulses made by this model always use the larger torrent template instead of the small one, so the sonic amplifier makes that a quite dangerous attack regardless of how many models are in the unit. Now another unique bit of Commonwealth kit is the seismic mortar, which is a weapon that is quite strong, often found on their mass 1 ships, but quite often one of the regular gun batteries can have that slot as well. And as a valor effect in the shooting step before the targets are declared by using this weapon, all the seismic mortars in the unit can gain the devastating quality as well. So yeah, if you've got some excess valor cards, you can actually use them on your seismic mortars as well to make them even more punchy. On top of that, some units have the seismic pounding rule. Well, one off the top of my head has that, and that says that a single attack with the hazardous quality by this unit, each activation, receives +2 action dice when using those weapons. If I'm not mistaken, they are now lead value 5, so that would mean it's a 7 dice attack from a seismic mortar, which is nothing to sneeze at for a small weapon slot. And then lastly, the clutch ability quantity is a quality. Now you can't really build your strategy around it because it is way too unreliable, but it does sort of give the Commonwealth, the Russian half of it, a bit of a horde force quality to them. Because it says, if this unit is destroyed, award victory points and complete any victory conditions as normal. However, you then roll a number of action dice equal to the round number. On one or more explosive hits, a single minimum-sized Kutsov or Rurik unit, the player can choose, may be placed in reserve. If more than one explosive hit is rolled, each additional die provides an additional Kutsov or 2 additional Ruriks to that unit, depending on the unit type. The maximum size of the unit is as indicated by the unit entry in the ORBAT, and any surplus models generated are lost. This last bit of the entry isn't all that important though, because, well, the unit sizes of Kutsovs and Ruriks are quite large, so you'll be lucky if you ever roll that many. The next part of it, however, is quite important. The facing of one action die may be replaced with an explosive hit if the destroyed unit was within 7 inch of a flagship unit, meaning that you will always trigger this ability to get an extra Kutsov if you place your models right with flagship units. And if you do want to lean into this rule, you do have to make sure that you have plenty of flagship units to have those bubbles spread out. This new unit is given no further upgrades or additional models. If it is subsequently destroyed, it can also award victory points as normal to your opponent. That also means that if you're facing the Russians, that means that you have to really target those flagships, or you will be getting a lot of reinforcements from the opponent this way, and that's not a small feat because their flagships are tough as old boots. Now before we get into the actual units, let's first have a look at their unique special weapons that they have. The first one is the Apocalypse Cannon. This is a very special weapon found only on the Rikhter ship. It shoots 22 dice at extreme range, which is the rule it has, with gunnery, devastating and hazardous. However, that efficiency really quickly drops as you get closer, because when you're in closing range it only shoots 12 dice, and in point blank it pretty much is a sitting duck. So if you want to take a model that just hangs back and pelts the opponent with artillery, that cannon really is a fun little addition to their roster. Another unique thing are their cryogenic blasts, which are made by their cryo generators. The cryo generators blast with 7 dice, actually with a blast quality, so you get to use that round templates, which is something that you have to be really careful about when you're facing this force, that you do not bundle your mass ones or even your cruisers together, because you can easily lose a few hull points if you're not careful with this. The Furnace Cascade is something with only a point blank firepower, and it has to shoot at the aft. It can only be found on one type of flyer on there. It comes with the torrent, devastating and hazardous quality, so it's sort of a fun thing. It flies over units and then uses that torrent template to fire in the back as a sort of a carpet bomb style attack, which is something that they do quite well as well. The Commonwealth also has a unique type of rocket salvo called the Katyusha rocket salvo. It fires pretty much a quite devastating amount of shots, same as a heavy rocket battery. It comes with the aerial quality, same as the heavy rocket battery. However, it gains sustained and extreme range quality rather, but it is also a limited weapon, and it can be found in some of those Ekranoplans I've discussed earlier. And if you take them, you do want to make sure that you have a ship in your roster with the supply depot rule, so that limited can actually be alleviated, because you're just going to have those games where you take one shot with that unit and half of your weapons drop out because it starts raining blanks. One rule that I didn't discuss yet that was mentioned on the previous slide was actually the mag rail weapon. It's found on one of the Colossi from the Commonwealth. It can either be used as a ramming weapon with the sustained quality, which isn't bad, or it can be shot like a type of railgun with gunnery and extreme range with 10 and 4 dice, so quite a powerful one, and it can be used in both profiles within the same turn thanks to that mag rail axe rule that was on there previously. In terms of other railguns, you've got the traditional smaller railgun that can be found on there with 5 dice as the lead weapon, but only 2 in support. And that's a common thing found on all railguns, because the tri-railgun also only has 3 dice in support, while having 8 as the main weapon. Now with rail reducing the citadel, you will be reaching those critical hits rather quickly, but if you want to pile all your shots together to go for catastrophic explosions, you do have a bit of an efficiency dip in there because of their low amount of support dice. Now that efficiency dip mostly goes away when shooting at aerial units, of course, but this is now capped at +3, so don't overdo it either, or that efficiency dip is going to return as well. The really good thing about railguns though is they all have the same profile regardless of their range band, and they come with extreme range as well. So yeah, it's one of the most player friendly or beginning player friendly weapons to have in the game, because your own positioning becomes less relevant and you can just shoot at any target regardless of your own range band, making them extremely easy to use. And they are one of the more iconic weapons from the Commonwealth, and one that players who field a lot of aerial units will really come to dread. And of course here we'll find the seismic mortar, the one that can be used with the devastating quality if you want to, and has a decent amount of shots as well, especially because they can be found on rather cheap Mass 1 ships called the Ruriks as well. It's a really good weapon in my opinion. And then we have the Shockwave Pulse 2 with 6 and 4 dice using the small torrent, but again that can become the large torrent if you're using 3 generators. And at that point you're tossing a big torrent with 14 dice that spells dooms for most large units. The Commonwealth actually has a very decent selection of battle fleets that you can get. They all come with the rather traditional bonuses, such as Valorous Conduct, allowing you to change cards of up to a value of 50 when you're using them. And they also have one unique one, but it's not quite out yet, which is the Sword Wing Strike. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. Regardless, the Commonwealth are getting their own type of special bomber style SRS when the Polish-Lithuanian aerial battle fleet gets here, and they can do sort of an ambush in the same style that the Lightning Raid works for the Prussians, or the Visitor Assault works for the Enlightened. What makes the Commonwealth unique in a way is that it is the only force, as far as I know, that can field a pure submarine force. Now I don't think that's a particularly good idea, because your submarines will be sitting ducks if your opponent comes with too many aerial units, but it is just neat that they can use it. It is the Ukrainian battle fleet. Now the Ukrainians also have their own unique rule that I didn't cover when talking about those, because it makes more sense to discuss them here. It's called Slava Ukraini, and it actually makes them quite good in an assault. This rule can only be used if this model is within 10 inch of one or more friendly units with the Ukrainian trait, so they do have to move in packs. Crippled models with this rule still use the battle ready value for their weapons with the submerged quality, and can reroll blank results when they are the target of the initial target of an assault. Now, this is quite strong because their main weapon is their torpedoes, or are their torpedoes of course, and if you cannot cripple them and have a much lower amount of dice, this is quite a strong ability. On top of that, when you take them in a Ukrainian battle fleet, all units with the Slava Ukraini rule in this battle fleet may reroll all action dice in an assault, so they become quite a dangerous assault type unit as well. And you have to remember, submerged units are allowed to assault other types of units, surface units as well. However, quite often, if you're facing a surface unit, you cannot be assaulted back, probably because the surface units forgot to pack their scuba gear. Another unique battle fleet that they can use is the Caspian battle fleet. This one basically means that you can spam skimmers, because the first slot that is mandatory is a skimmer slot, and if you want to go hard on ekranoplans, this one isn't a bad one. It can be led by their big ekranoplan should you so desire, but it also has a few other options as well. And yeah, the Caspian overthrusters gain +1 to the number of inches indicated by this rule, so they actually move faster than before. Now, beach landing missions aren't yet in the game, but they will be coming, especially now since the ground tokens got released, or will be released when the Fortunes and Glory set gets here. So it's only a matter of time before your Alexayev class ships become more important for these types of beach landing missions, and giving them some extra speed to get there is definitely going to help. The Icebreaker Battlefleet also has a unique bonus, meaning that cryo generators in the Battlefleet may roll 2 dice and discard 1 die for determining iceberg formations. Now, we've already discussed how they can do the cryogenic blast, which was that blast shot that you could take, but if you're not using that, you can actually use them to rather unreliably roll to create an iceberg formation. And if you take them in this Battlefleet, that rather unreliable roll becomes, at least twice as reliable as before. So this can be quite a fun one if you want to experiment with that ability from cryo generators. And then finally, one that should be interesting to any faction, the OG mercenaries in this game, the Black Wolf Mercenary Battlefleet. Now, if you take this one, you first have to take a different Battlefleet if you want to use them as mercenaries before you can unlock this slot. And if you take this one, the flagship has to be either the Deathbringer or the Anastasia, which are the personal flagships of their leader. You also have to include a submerged unit in there, and those are the ones with the Ukrainian trait. However, they will lose that Ukrainian trait and instead gain the Black Wolf Mercenary quality, which we've discussed. They get actually quite a bit better if you start steamrolling your opponent from turn 2 onwards. Other than that mandatory submerged unit and the mandatory named flagship, there's quite a bit of flexibility of what you can include in here. So if you've got some fun Russian ships that you want to include in your force, you can do so via these Black Wolf mercenaries. The one thing though that is locked out are their big colossi. They do not show up with the Black Wolf mercenaries because the submerged units have to have the Ukrainian trait, and the larger colossi, the Marena and Kostroma, do not have that keyword, so keep that in the back of your head when selecting this force. If you do want stompy robots in your force as mercenaries, you'll have to look at the vastly superior Imperium lineup. In terms of patrons though, if you want to make a full Black Wolf mercenary fleet, you can actually do that using this first patron, the Wolf's Bride. It'll cost you 1 victory point, quite cheeky because you actually have to be up in victory points in order to activate the Black Wolf mercenary rule, and you're a bit behind already, so you're going to have a very good first turn in order to use this ability. But then there is no limit to the number of Black Wolf battle fleets you can include in your force, and you're not required to take any other battle fleets before you can take the Black Wolf battle fleet as an option. However though, you have to remember there's only 2 flagships that you can take, so yeah, good luck getting more than 2 of these battle fleets in there, because there's just not enough flagships to do so. Unique ships cannot be taken more than once. Another very strong entry is Victor Blomqvist, the White Navy Aerial Admiral. This one allows you to take up to 1 additional aerial unit in your Commonwealth battle fleets, except for any mercenary fleets, and that's not the big deal. The big deal is that 1 flagship unit in the force just gains the Fortunes of War special rule out of nowhere, so you're not really having to hunt for a specific flagship with that rule, you can just include it. Fortunes of War is one of the more important elements to include in your force if you want to build a very competitive list, so this is definitely one that I think is going to be a popular option for people wanting to try different things but still have a competitive list within the Commonwealth roster. And then another strong entry, I think, for just a single victory point. During the upkeep phase of each round, you may remove all the levels of disorder from a model from models in a single Commonwealth unit in your force. That can be quite strong, especially if you're using them as carriers, because carriers at Chaos and Disarray are no longer allowed to send out any aircraft. So that's quite a strong ability for only a single victory point. Now onto the actual units themselves, and I'm starting with the Borodino class ship because this is the flagship that comes both in the 1-player starter set and comes in the Russian half of the Hunt for the Prometheus set, so it's one that quite a lot of Commonwealth players will get into their hands when they're starting the game. The basic Borodino battleship is an absolute staple within the Commonwealth and one of the best battleships in the game, I think. Clocks in at 248 points, comes with 3 heavy gun batteries that all have a forward-facing arc, so you can pile them all together neatly. Comes with a heavy broadside, comes with a heavy torpedo salvo, and has defensive stats with armor 8 and citadel 16 that are absolutely tough as old boots. 8 hull points in battle ready state and 5 in crippled state, although it'll be harder to push them into that crippled state thanks to their ablative armor. With mass 3, that means that you'll be disregarding 3 exploding hits from your opponent. On top of this fantastic lineup of weapons, they also have a cryo generator with cryo capacitors, so they're always shooting extra heavy blasts as well with their cryo generators, which is great. And it comes with heavy firepower, so for a Valor effect you can shoot all weapons at the lead value rather than having to use your support value. This makes it an exceptionally good ship to go for the tri-railgun upgrade. It costs 5 points per gun, but those 15 points really do make sense if you've got heavy firepower, because their main downside is that you do not get a great amount of dice in your support value, like I've mentioned earlier, but heavy firepower just simply overrules this. And to add insult to injury, this unit can now be taken as a squadron, meaning you can tag a second Borodino battleship on there. Now you're still going to have a unit that will require quite a lot of Valor cards to get the most out of, but you have to remember in version 3.05 of the game, you have to destroy both of these battleships before you actually score a victory point as your opponent. And you can no longer score a victory point for Squadron Killer bonus and Flagship, so that one's only going to award 1 victory points to your opponent if you want to. And in addition, if you take that squadron combined with Victor Blomqvist, that whole unit is going to get the Fortunes of War rule, meaning that they will be extra hard to completely cripple, meaning that your Russian force is going to have that rule up quite often. So it makes complete sense to buy the Russian half from Hunt for the Prometheus and still get a 1-player starter box as well, because 2 Borodinos absolutely kicks ass. Now if you've only got the single one and you want Fortunes of War, you can still opt for the Paktushov. Clocks in at 315 points, so quite a bit more, but it does automatically come with that Fortunes of War as well, and it also gains the Inspirational rule, meaning that your units around it are going to be fighting slightly better. And you mustn't forget, having flagships is important for that. Quantity is a quality rule as well to trigger. In addition to that, it also comes with elite crew, making them slightly better in assaults as well. So the Paktushov really is quite a solid option as well. And then the last variant, if you're playing with Ukrainians and actually do want a surface vessel to go with, you can go for the Kiev. Comes in at 280 points. However, this one does slot out one of its gun batteries for a shroud generator, and we've talked about this earlier. This largely protects it against big massive volleys, but it has a bit of an unfortunate overlap with the ablative armor rule that it also has. However though, with Slava Ukraini and Frey 14 you can actually make quite a good assault ship out of this one, so if you want to experiment more with that one, the Kiev is also a fun little option, and you can still use it even if you want to branch out. You can still use a flagship, I should say, even if you want to branch out in the submarine faction more. When it comes to the Commonwealth frontline sprue, you get a few options for the cruiser. The most basic cruiser, but by no means a bad cruiser, is the Kutsov. Clocks in at a mere 90 points, which is really annoying for the opponent, because that plus ablative armor means that it is quite a nasty unit to have to take down. It comes with 2 heavy gun batteries, one armed in the front, one in the side, and so it has more in the back, I should say, and has a more side-firing profile, because you want something in port or starboard arc to stack those two together. Really not a problem for these ships though, because they do not come with tertiary torpedo salvos, which are traditionally fired to the front, making these ships still quite easy to use for beginning players. In addition, you'll really want to build some Kutsovs when you get your set, because they can be used for that. Quantity is a quality rule, meaning that even if you do not put Kutsovs in your list, there's a good chance you'll end up using them anyway. If you give this unit 2 tri-railguns, you will bump the cost up to 100 points, but then you also have an excellent sniper unit that can be rolled up to the flank and still shoot pretty much almost across the board with their extreme range to target any pesky flyers going around, while avoiding a lot of the incoming firepower as well, so also a very strong option for a beginning player. If you, however, want to build a unit that is more geared towards becoming a midfield brawler, the Norilsk heavy cruiser definitely is something you could build as well. It is a big variant, and again, beginning players quite often like to build the biggest variant of a cruiser that you can make, and this one is a really solid choice at only 112 points. It sacrifices some of the speed of the Kutsov, but at speed 7 this is still quite reasonable for a heavy cruiser, and it gets an additional hull point as well to duke it out in the center. It comes with a seismic mortar, however these can now be changed for regular gun batteries for free, and I suggest you do so if you get the more modern kit. If you get the older version of the plastics as well, it's not that hard to snip it away, by the way, and replace that weapon with a regular gun battery, because that means that it just better stacks with the two regular heavy gun batteries that it also has. The big deal about the Norilsk though is the fact that it also comes with a heavy broadside. Broadsides are only really effective once you get into point blank range, and that's why this unit is more comfortable sitting in the center line and duking it out, sort of sailing straight into the opposing lines. It has the toughness to do so, and it has the firepower to do so. And apart from that one small swap out for the seismic mortar, there's really no point, I think, in upgrading the Norilsk too much. The Kutsov is a better candidate to go for railgun options. There are also options to upgrade to heavy rocket batteries for 3 points, but to be honest, I would never do so when you're taking a Commonwealth list. The railgun is actually a better anti-air weapon, and rocket batteries are sort of known for the better choice to shoot at aerial units, but seeing how they are just outclassed by the railgun, I see no point in upgrading to heavy rocket batteries ever, so I'm not going to harp on that point every single unit entry. I'm going to say it once: ignore the rocket batteries when you're a Commonwealth player. You also get quite a lot of small Rurik frigates, again, a prime candidate if you want to use your Kutsovs in your basic list to use for your quantity as a quality rule, and they come with seismic mortars baseline, and this is actually quite a good weapon on a Mass 1 ship, because usually the regular gun batteries on Mass 1 ships only reach out to 20 inch, but that's not the case for the seismic mortar. Going back to the weapon profile, the seismic mortar actually throws 5 and 2 dice in long range, and that makes it an ideal unit to also shoot at aerial units, because having a range band increase basically means nothing to them, and having Mass 1 ships that can act as long range artillery is also something quite unique for the Commonwealth. And these little Ruriks now go up to 8 models in a unit. They do clock in at slightly more points, 31 points per model now, but with armor 5, citadel 12 and 3 hull points, they are quite tough to take down. Their ablative armor isn't all that important, it's only a Mass 1 ship anyway, and you tend not to be allowed to roll exploding dice at Mass 1 targets, at least if you're being targeted with gunnery weapons. But yeah, a large unit of Citadel 12 Mass 1 ships is always a nightmare to take down, especially when they come with 3 hull points. You just gotta remember that they do not come with a point blank firepower, so if you find yourself in point blank from the enemy, you're going to have to resort to your light broadsides, which in a large group are impressive, but not so much when it comes to a few individual Ruriks. With the Commonwealth frontline sprue you also get 2 extra options, and one that is on here, but simply because I couldn't place it anywhere else. The Commonwealth frontline sprue, to say again, does not build Markov's Prometheus. I'm just mentioning it here because it's quite common to get a hold of this ship if you buy the Hunt for the Prometheus starter set as a Russian player. More on that in a second. The Commonwealth frontline sprue does build the Senius fast cruiser, and I also think that is an absolute hidden gem in the Commonwealth lineup. At only 75 points, with 8 hull points with very nice distribution and super fast speed, this really is a solid option. The seismic mortar in the front can now actually be replaced with either a gun battery, if you want to line it up with the heavy gun battery, which doesn't actually cost too many points, but it can also be replaced with a railgun now, on top of an upgrade for your heavy gun battery to be upgraded to a tri-rail gun. If you do that, you actually get quite an efficient and easy to maneuver sniper, especially for aerial units with your Cineus. The interesting build options don't just stop there for the Cineus though. It comes with the seismic pounding, meaning that single seismic mortar on there is going to shoot with 7 dice, and a cheeky little thing that quite a lot of Commonwealth players do is just upgrade the heavy gun battery to a magnetic generator, allowing you to have a unit that is really good against doom stacks of SRS, something that is quite often used in competitive play, and still shoots a nifty little 7 dice attack to plink away at that. If you take that upgrade, it really only costs 70 points. It can zip around the board quite quickly to intervene against enemy SRS doom stacks, and if your opponent starts shooting at that model, it feels like you're always winning, because then he's shooting at something that is super tanky for a low points cost. So yeah, another interesting build with the Cineus Fast Cruiser. And if you really want to give your opponent headaches with the amount of shots he has to fire at your units before they can go down, take the Oleg monitor. It only clocks in at 65 points, but it basically, apart from 1 point lower in Citadel, has the same stats as most other factions' cruisers, on top of an ablative armor. So if you want to create a swarm that can just sit on an objective, for instance during the research station scenario, the encounter, or if you want to go and grab the oil fields, the Oleg monitor is a really solid option to include in your list, because it changes the profile of your force to quite a tanky one, and the Russians really excel at that. And then the most odd entry in the entire ORBAT is the Markov's Prometheus. This one uses the Enlightened ship model, but according to the lore, that actually got captured, the Prometheus, by the Russians. And they've stuck a bunch of tri-railguns on there. So for 3 tri-railguns for 245 points, this is already quite interesting. You do lose quite a bit of toughness, because it comes with sort of defensive stats more associated with the Enlightened rather than the Commonwealth, but it is a generator ship, meaning that all the other ships of mass 2 and above around it count as being equipped with the generators that this one has. And it comes with magnetic, shield and shroud generator, being all of the defensive ones. In addition, its experimental shield amplifier increases the number of dice you gain from those shield generators by another +1, and even allows you to go to a maximum of 4 dice rather than the usual 3. So if you want to make really an anchor unit within your force, Markov's Prometheus definitely is a good choice. In fact, that actually makes buying Hunt for the Prometheus a really interesting option altogether if you want to start with the Commonwealth, because then you will get access to Markov's Prometheus. And if you have any interest of later down the line getting the Fortunes and Glory set as well to add some mercenaries to your force, you will actually have some of the smaller Mass 1 automata that the Enlightened can use when using the Crimson League mercenaries that can be found in Fortunes of Glory. So ironically, buying 2 different 2-player starter boxes is a great way to instantly have a very large amount of Commonwealth models somehow. If, however, you want to start your Commonwealth force in a more traditional manner by buying the 1-player starter set, you will also get the Commonwealth Advanced sprue along with it, and in it you will find flyer units, 2 of them, that can either be built as the Irkutsk Skydrill, the Saransk Sky Furnace, or the Tunguska Sky Cruiser. The Tunguska Sky Cruiser is actually the more basic model, clocking in at only 100 points, and compared to some of its other Russian counterparts, it is slightly more fragile and not quite as fast as perhaps you would have liked with only speed 7. However, it does gain the advantage of being an aerial unit and therefore being able to shoot at pretty much anything with its 2 heavy gun batteries. On top of that, it has a few extra neat tricks that it can do, such as deploying in a low-level strike to give it an extra point of armor, which suddenly does boost its toughness, and it means it cannot be seen by your opposing force straight away, which makes it a strong little entry. It can be a lot faster though if you use its linear dash rule along with hammer sweep to get a massive +3 inch when moving in a straight line, so keep in mind that if you want it to move, it can. And in fact, if it wants to move away, it can use strategic withdrawal as well. That is somewhat dangerous though if you're not doing it in a Commonwealth faction fleet where you do get strategic reserves, because it doesn't have any rules allowing it to sort of override the reserve role, meaning that if you're unlucky and you use strategic withdrawal, it might not have a surefire way to get back into the thick of it without also having strategic reserves. The Saransk Sky Furnace is one that actually comes with 2 Katyusha rocket salvos aimed at the front, and has that neat little torrent template with the furnace cascade aimed at the back, and they've got some berserkers giving you assaults that have the hazardous and devastating qualities as well, although with only Fray 8 the assaults aren't exactly that spectacular. The big punch is in the Katyusha rocket salvos, and with rocket barrage it can actually become quite a bit stronger as well. It also protects your own ships quite well with the heavy escort rule, giving you +2 defense to models nearby, and it can shoot down enemy SRS through flag barrage as well, so this is a way more complicated unit in the special rules that it has, but it does bring a lot of neat elements to the table for the Commonwealth player. Be advised though, if you're taking these, I would also make sure that you've got 1 supply depot ship in your force somewhere, so you can actually restock on your Katyusha rocket salvos, because if this one suffers from bad luck, it really does suffer from bad luck. One ship that is more of a meme though is the Skydrill. It now is 122 points. It is more reliable than ever to get to the enemy front lines though, thanks to Cloud Dive, allowing it to deploy at the end of the deployment phase, if you will, by dropping in from the skies slightly closer to the enemy to begin with. It also offers that flag barrage protection as well, and with its infrasound detector, it can actually be used to take away obscured bonuses from the enemy as well. That big assault bore actually hits like an absolute truck when it does hit the enemy, but I suppose that's also the downside of this unit. You really do have to reach the enemy before it can do anything, and while it can be quite fun, I don't think it is meant to be taken as the most competitive option in the Russian lineup yet, but it can be good fun when having a casual game with your friends. The other types of units that can be found on the Commonwealth Advanced Sprue are the Guyana Shockwave Hovercraft, the Zuber Destroyer Hovercraft, or the Yak Transport Hovercraft. Now, one thing to mention though, the Zuber Destroyer Hovercraft cannot be built baseline with this sprue. If you want to build this one, you have to combine it with parts that can be found on the Marena sprue, but I've decided to include them here because most of the parts are used from this advanced sprue. The most basic version is the Yak Transport Hovercraft, and personally I would recommend building that one first if you've got 2 of them. They only clock in at 40 points, they do come with 2 rocket batteries, so they've got a bit of long range firepower for you to use, and they are now these transport hovercrafts that act as landing vessels, so you can actually deploy some of your assault tokens when the beach landing missions come. In addition, you can put them on that Alexayev that we'll be discussing in a bit to actually use your landing vessels quite aggressively, so building 2 Yaks is never a bad idea. And with Freight 10, it's actually not a unit that is half bad at assaulting either, so definitely an interesting choice. If you've got multiple ones of these Commonwealth Advanced Sprue and you have the ability to build 4 Guyana Shockwave Hovercraft though, which happens to be the maximum size, that does become interesting as well, because they come with that shockwave generator that was discussed. You really want 3 of them in a unit to use that large template, but when you do, this can become absolutely devastating against opposing Mass 1 ships. So this one's also interesting to build, but I would only do so if you're able to make them build the max unit, because at only 2 of them, those shockwave generators really don't come into play that efficiently. And then finally, if you have the parts, you can build the Zuber Destroyer Hovercraft if you also bought a Marena set and don't want to build your Boyars as the Boyar Destroyers. It comes with 3 rocket batteries, which can be quite fun to have a lot of firepower. However, its points cost is a bit prohibitive, I think. Clocking in at 52 points, for something with Citadel 12, even if they do have 4 hull points like all the other hovercraft do. This starts to become a bit too expensive, if you ask me. If you're talking about a roster that can include an Oleg for 65 points, I think paying 52 points for this model is just, that's not done. That's not a competitive option. Moving on though, we have the Commonwealth support sprue. The best way to actually get some cheeky little carriers for cheap in your force, because the Pravda support carrier is your basic 4-2 SRS capacity cruiser, and at only 125 points, this one actually is one of the cheapest Mass 2 carriers that you can find in the game. Not a lot of bells and whistles on them, just a simple rocket battery at 360 degrees, no torpedoes, so you're very much getting a ship that is only about the SRS. Not a bad thing though, because usually these types of ships like to hide themselves behind a rock somewhere and do nothing else, and so not having to pay for any torpedoes or anything actually makes them more efficient, if you ask me. And you mustn't forget, as a beginning player, if you've got an encounter where you have fog of war, you cannot shoot decently at all at units that haven't yet activated and shot yet, unless you park an SRS token against them. So including a single Pravda support carrier in your fleet should always be on your radar, simply because if you roll a fog of war mission, you're pretty much up a certain creek without a certain instrument. The other build option you can get is the Morozko Heavy Cryo Cruiser, which clocks in at 131 points. It's got stats that is quite similar to the Norilisk as well, with a heavy broadside and 2 heavy gun batteries. Comes with a rocket battery at the front, but that can easily be swapped out for another gun battery, which is something I would always do. It now also comes with quantity as a quality, so that is a great little thing that was added as well. Felt like more of an omission than it was missing, but that's now been fixed. The main reason to get these are of course because of the cryo generators, which also come with cryo capacitors, and cryo capacitors allow you to use your cryogenic blast with a sustained quality as well, making it that much more efficient. If you like this unit and you're able to build 3 of them though, you can get the 3 Bogatyr, which isn't that much of a points increase of only 19 points per model, and you do get some funky little extra things on there. The most important one being the Devil's Own Luck thing, allowing you to cancel with a single card regardless of the value once per turn, which is quite strong. On top of that, it comes with logistical support, giving you an extra card in your hand, which is great, and if you want to increase the firepower, it also comes with Pack Hunter on top of that to give you additional shots per model participating in the attack, so well worth the 19 points upgrade if you ask me. If you want to build a version though that does not come with the extra cryo capacitors, but just swaps those out for a large little front drill for some ramming actions, you can go for the Katanga Cryo Assault Cruiser. Actually now slightly cheaper than the Morozko as well, and it doesn't come with a heavy broadside like the Morozko does. So yeah, a bit more of a different tactic with these. These are just made to ram your opponent, and yeah, that's a scary unit to see coming towards you. Your opponent is going to have to respond to them when they come barreling down the center line. Definitely not a bad option to build, and 3 very interesting choices for the cruisers. Now when it comes to the Ekranoplans found on the Commonwealth support sprue, you sort of have to be lucky enough in a way to be able to build the Dragunov Ekranoplan Brawler. This option was only really added when the original sprue was upgraded, so the Dragunov, if you are able to build it, great. If not, you're going to be building the Stolitov Ekranoplan Harriers. Now don't feel too bad if you can't build the Dragunov, because if you ask me, the better one is actually still the Stolitov Ekranoplan. It comes with the Katyusha rocket salvo, which can be quite dangerous in larger units, because it's got a great amount of support value. It comes with a cruiser-sized torpedo salvo as well, and it has a regular rocket battery on top of it at 50 points per model. The fact that these are actually cheaper than the Zuber is more of a problem with the Zuber being too expensive though, and not so much with these being too cheap, because they are pretty much where they need to be, I think, at their points cost now. It also has the torpedo salvo, which is a weapon that is not all that common in the Russian lineup, so definitely a strong entry. On top of that, it has the auxiliary mine layer rule, allowing you to drop a single mine token for each unit of Stolitov Ekranoplans, and you can include up to 3 additional models at 50 points each for a 250 point unit. On top of that, it comes with rocket barrage, making even more use out of your Katyusha rocket salvos. I wouldn't use that one on the rocket batteries though, and you can't stack the rocket batteries with the Katyushas, so the rocket batteries really are a weaker secondary attack that comes along with it. However, they do benefit from Spotter though, which is again a great combo with that one Pravda carrier that I pretty much advise you to build as well. And a fun little side thing, I think if you take this in a Caspian battle fleet, you gain Caspian Overthruster 9, along with their 1-inch drift and speed that makes them the fastest models in a straight line in the game, if I'm not mistaken. So that's also another thing that you've got a bit of bragging rights about if you're a Commonwealth player. The Dragunov swaps out the Katyusha rocket salvo for a rocket battery, but it does gain flak barrage and it comes with pack hunter as well, and that is important if you can go up to 3 models. However, the rocket batteries that are on there are perhaps not the best weapons to really get to larger dice pools, so you can swap them out for gun batteries for free, or if you're willing to pay an extra 4 points per model, can go for 2 railguns. However, that brings them up to 60 points, and again, in a Commonwealth roster, there's always that Oleg sort of hovering above these types of units as just like, at some point, I'm just becoming the more efficient one. Next up we have 3 flagships that can be built from the Rikhter Battlefleet set. Now they also come with plastics, but we've discussed those largely. The 3 builds that you can make is the Rikhter Artillery Dreadnought, clocking in at 270 points, and this is perfect for somebody who likes to just hang back and pelt your opponent with firepower from a long distance, because that Apocalypse cannon only really shoots well if you're shooting from more than 20 inch away, so your opponent has to be in that 20 to 40 inch range bracket for it to make the most out of it, at which point it can really use its 2 heavy torpedo salvos to great effect as well, and the 2 gun batteries are pretty much just on there for when you're in a position you would rather not be in. Luckily though, they can be swapped out with railguns, and if you can find the points, I actually would do that, because again, they're next to useless at the range where this ship wants to be. The heavy broadside is also just not something you really want to play for with this ship anyway. The cool thing though is it has a void engine magazine, meaning that if this unit is crippled or while it has a generator shutdown critical damage marker, its Apocalypse cannon loses the extreme range quality and instead gains the limited quality, so you definitely do not want to get generator shut down or get crippled with this ship, because yeah, then your Rikhter is going to be in trouble. One cool thing though, it does come with a magnetic generator and a shield generator, providing you with quite a bit of defense also against SRS, which are the easiest way to get to it, so that's great equipment to have anyway. And it also comes with kinetic dampeners, making the full reverse ability less of a problem, because that's something that you definitely want to do with this ship every single turn, and that's just to park it somewhere in the back line and keep it there. If you like your Borodino, you can get a heavier Borodino called the Moskva Heavy Battleship. It is quite a bit more expensive at 311 points, and it comes with 2 regular gun batteries, all aimed at the front by the way, to supplement that firepower, and now comes with 2 heavy torpedo salvos, so you're getting quite a bit more. You're also getting quite a few more hull points in there, 2 more in the battle ready state and 1 more in the crippled state as well. While you're not really losing out on that much compared to the Moskva. In addition, compared to the Borodino, sorry. In addition, you also get focused gunnery along with heavy firepower, and you get the shockwave generator with the sonic amplifier, so this ship really is meant to sort of go out there and hurt somebody. Now you can upgrade everything with railguns as well, but this is the type of ship where I'm going like, it might not be needed. I mean, you want to get close to the enemy to also use your elite crew for better assaults, and with Frey 14, these models are no slouches in assaults anyway, and you want to get close to them to use your shockwave generator, along with the sonic amplifier to use that larger torrent at a larger distance as well. So this is the type of unit that doesn't just want to hang back and shoot. I therefore do not think the railgun upgrade is that important. And lastly, you also have a slightly cheaper variant at 298 points that does have one heavy gun battery less, but other than that comes with quite the same weapon loadout really, and comes with quite a few extra useful buffs for your force as well. Command Codes allows you to reroll one particularly atrocious dice roll as well per turn if you're close enough to the command ship as well, which can be quite strong, which is a handy little bad luck protection and really the reason why you're taking this ship. However, it also comes with a neat little infrasound detector allowing you to remove the obscured bonus from enemies found close by, and it has the inspirational rule allowing you to reduce different levels of disorder every single turn and allow you to re-roll a dice as well. Comes with logistical support, giving you an extra card, which is neat, has a shield generator for extra defense, and is, in my opinion, one of the better ships for that supply depot rule. If you're using a lot of the Katyusha rockets that we've mentioned earlier, this ship really can be quite useful. The Commonwealth has quite a lot of different flagships, and here's two of them that I'm discussing that also come in two different boxes, but I'm just grouping them together as we're doing flagships anyway. The first is the Mozhayski fleet carrier, clocking in at 245 points, and this is your typical SRS-84 ship. However, it also comes with heavy firepower, which is useful because there's 3 regular gun batteries on there, and should you so desire, that can also be upgraded to railguns for 15 points per, bringing it up to 260 points. Worth considering if you're using heavy firepower on it, because that allows you to really just hang back and launch your SRS at your opponent. Combine the railguns with Skyfire and you've also got something that is quite scary as an anti-air shooting platform as well. So yeah, definitely like the Mozhayski, an absolute staple, and one of the better carrier versions I think in the game. And one of the more unique flagships definitely is the Alexayev Ekranoplan Heavy Transport, clocking in at 220 points. It comes with 3 Katyusha salvos, so that can quite hurt. 3 regular gun batteries, to supplement its aerial firepower. On top of that, this one comes with spotters, so ideally you'll be combining it with an SRS token as well to get more out of those extreme range weapons with the Katyusha. It also has landing vessel, so that's going to come into its own more when those beach landing missions are there. Priority signals allow you to try again with one of your Valor cards in case the first one gets cancelled, so you get a bit of protection against facing fortunes of warships as well. And with its rocket barrage, it's going to shoot better with its Katyusha rocket salvos anyway, so you get a bit more oomph out of the firepower. Now in terms of defensive stats though, this isn't the greatest ship, because it's armor 6, citadel 14 now though, so that's been upped a bit. But yeah, it really can't take much of a beating. You really do want to use your Caspian overthrusters to be moving at least 10 inch to gain that obscured bonus. One of its neatest ability is the skimmer transport, because during the reserve steps of any round where this model is in the play area, when a friendly Mass 1 skimming unit of 2 models is activated and in reserve, it can be immediately deployed within 2 inch of this model rather than using the other deployment options. Once a skimmed unit has been deployed this way, it actually loses this rule. I've mentioned earlier that 2 Yaks is something that is quite good to build because of their good fray value as well, and I think this is the best type of skimmer unit to pair with the Alexayev Ekranoplan Heavy Transport. And I'm not just talking about the better fray value here, I'm also talking about the fact that the Yaks are also landing vessels, so if you're doing a beach landing mission soon, these really are going to come into their own, and that's why I suggest you build them that way. At the start of the video we were talking about the Black Wolf Battlefleet set coming with 2 different flagships, unique flagships, and those are the Anastasia and the Deathbringer. The Anastasia is a version of the Big Doom Donut that is specific to the Commonwealth, or to the Black Wolf I should say, and that comes with all tri-railgun options. Now the only problem with the Doom Donut though is that you can only shoot 2 tri-railguns at the same target at the same time, so even though it has 4, they cannot all be piled together to shoot at the same thing. It does however come with heavy broadsides at pretty much any facing, so you have to remember when it says F and A, it can shoot both at the front and at the aft at the same time, which can be quite handy for this particular unit because it does have unexpected arrival, allowing it to pop up anywhere on the board so that it can start firing with those heavy broadsides. With crippled stats, obviously, but that'll get better as the game goes on, so it really is just a matter of plonk it down the center and start blasting away at the enemy. The other rules it gets is a massive list. I mean, the ablative armor with mass 5 is really hard. It might as well be shrouded at that point. It has advanced repair facilities, allowing you to throw 7 dice and potentially heal up any any hull damage that you've suffered if you're lucky enough to get those exploding hits. It comes with cryo generator with cryo capacitor, so that's going to be useful for the second round onwards after it has arrived via unexpected arrival. It comes with an internal magnetic generator, so you can start having away at opposing SRS as well. It comes with an internal shield generator on top of that. It does have large target though, meaning that it can be in multiple arcs from any unit shooting at it, and it comes with lumbering, meaning that it can only drift 3" rather than the usual 5, and all gunnery weapons will gain reroll blanks when shooting at this ship. On top of that, it also comes with some SRS tokens, only 5 though, so that's not too bad, but it does offer up all the other utility that come along with SRS. So all in all, a hefty price tag, but quite a lot of things that it does, and getting the most out of it is going to be the thing that you're going to have to do as the Commodore. The other option is the Deathbringer, which is now only 281 points, and that is the large Mass 3 submarine that you can build as well. It is got a very interesting rule called the Breaker of Bows. That means that this unit may ram surface units. That's great because it comes with the Semenov assault bore, which is pretty great, but this unit scores an additional victory point each time it scores victory points for destroying a surface unit with an assault or a ramming action. And with Fray 15, you're quite likely to be able to get some extra VP using it this way, especially because it now comes with the Submarauder rule, allowing it to ram straight away. And yeah, the Black Wolf mercenaries really do need to pile up all of those different victory points if they want to use their ability, because they have to be ahead in victory points during a check for victory step. With 2 heavy torpedo salvos as well, aimed at the front, and then 1 aimed at the back, along with heavy broadsides and 2 seismic mortars. This ship also has quite a bit of oomph in terms of firepower, but you do have to be careful that you don't deploy it too close to the enemy, because remember, torpedoes cannot fire within 5". However, using full steam ahead and hammer sweep at the same time means that this one can actually get quite a bit of a good and efficient run going towards the enemy, so you might still be able to use your heavy torpedo salvos on the turn where it arrives using the Submarauder rule as well. And I don't think this is the type of unit where you're going to have to take a dive at the end of your turn every single time that you activate this one. So yeah, it's a very interesting option now, and one that can wreak havoc on most opponents now that it's got the Submarauder rule. There's just one thing you have to be careful for. It's a Fortunes of War ship, and if you're deep diving at the end of it and your opponent has a few cards that he's been holding back on to play at the very end of the turn, then he can do so without you having access to Fortunes of War as well. So be careful about the timing of these 2 special rules. And like I said at the start, the Commonwealth really can do a full submerged fleet, I should say, and the Akula Battlefleet set is exactly the thing that allows it. If you're not building the Deathbringer, you can build the Akula Grand Submarine, which is now 230 points, which comes with only a single heavy torpedo salvo this time around, but has 2 regular torpedo salvos firing alongside with it, along with a torpedo salvo firing at the aft as well. These now come with the Silent Hunter rule, allowing them to be deployed quite a bit closer towards the enemy as well, and they can drop mines on top of that. meaning it can deploy quite a bit closer to the enemy. Along with hammer sweep and full steam ahead, you can expect to go up to, well, full steam ahead allows you to double your drift, going 6 inch forward, and hammer sweep gives you an extra inch as long as you do not take any turns as well, making them reasonably fast for submarines, which is a good thing because their Slava Ukraini rule allows them to hit a bit harder in an assault as well. With their Frey 9, they're not really going to be destroying too many things, I think, but it's still a decent enough option and can really trouble a couple of cruisers of Mass 2. And if you want to fire more of these torpedoes, you can actually get an additional model for 230 points, or you can attach some Piranha escorts to it, which can be found here, meaning you can have 2 extra Piranha escorts attached to this one as well, meaning that you will have a very big chance of being able to use that Slava Ukraini rule as well. It does, however, come with temperamental design, making repairs on it slightly more difficult. Yeah, make sure that you do not put it into too much of into the thick of it, because repairing it once it gets damaged is going to be tricky. Now, point for point, the Akula Grand Submarine, when you're looking at the amount of firepower, isn't the greatest. That role actually goes to the Kisak Attack Submarine. You get a heavy torpedo salvo for only 60 points, which is pretty amazing. However, this one cannot go closer to the enemy because it doesn't have the Silent Hunter rule. It does, however, move slightly faster with full steam ahead, which combines very well with their Agile rule, though, and it has Maritime Patrol, allowing you to ignore any submerged keywords if you're close enough or within range of an SRS with the rocket battery that comes mounted on it. And it has the Minesweeper rule, which is quite a handy little thing if your opponent likes to use quite a lot of them. The Piranha Hunter submarines are able to get a bit closer to your opponent using the Vanguard rule if they want to, and they also have the Giant Slayer rule, meaning that you get to reroll blanks if they're shooting at any Mass 3 targets, and seeing how these can come in pretty big squadrons of 5, that means that you're launching a pretty devastating torpedo salvo at any surface or submerged flagships or skimmers, if you're, for instance, facing French or the New Egyptians. The Commonwealth also has access to big stompy robots, and they come in the Marena Battlefleet set. Now, before I discuss the big stompy robots, it needs to be said that they also come with the Boyar heavy frigates. That was the part that could be used on the hovercraft to create the Zuber, but like I said, don't feel bad if you can't, because it's not exactly the strongest entry. I think the Boyar heavy frigate, though, at 74 points, comes with a regular gun battery. That's not great, because you want to have it stack with the rocket battery as well. However, that increases the points cost by another +3, making them all cost 40 points. For 2 gun batteries, that's not the end of the world, but they get rocket barrage to sweeten the deal slightly, and if you get a full unit of 6 of those, that can be quite a bit of neat little additional rocket firepower for your Commonwealth fleet. In terms of big stompy robots, you get 2, which is the Marena Vitruvian Colossus at 136 points, or a bit more expensive, the Kostroma Vitruvian Colossus. Now let's first start with the Marena. This is the basic bashy one. It comes with a giant assault bore as one of its arms and 2 gun batteries to boot. You can upgrade the gun batteries, but I'm not sure it's quite worth the cost to do so, because it's all about ramming with this one. It has the Davka special rule, meaning that once at any point during its activation, instead of making a normal ramming action, this unit may make the following action as a Valor effect, and that is the painful little thing. You do have to use a Valor card for it, which can be ignored. However, it can now be done at any point during its activation, meaning you can run up to the target a bit, see if your Valor effect goes off, and if it doesn't mean that your movement action is over or anything, because the rest of your activation can just continue as normal. If it uses the Davka, using its fist, this model may grab an initial target within 3 inch and make a ramming action using its Semyonov assault bore. The ramming action gains +10 action dice bonus instead of any bonus for the ramming distance, so you get quite a nice action dice pool if you do that ram. And with it now being at any point during the activation, it is no longer really a gamble if you want to use that one or do a traditional ram later on if your Valor effect gets cancelled, so that's a great deal. So as far as submarauders go, this one is about as basic as it gets, but it really does a good job for doing that ramming attack as well. It has aggressive crew as well, allowing you to reroll blanks during an assault. However, with phrase 7, I don't think you're really going to get that far. It also has a cryo generator, and the downside to it is it doesn't gel well with the submarauder rule, where you're not able to really use it because the crippled profile of it. Inspirational, though, is a pretty cool rule for it to have, but again, you might end up being far away from your own units if you're just trying to reach those annoying things in the backline with your submarauder rules. Next up we have the Kostroma Vitruvian Colossus, and I actually think this is the most interesting submarauder in the game, because I do not think this one wants to be deployed as a submarauder all of the time. I mean, if you see something particularly scary from your opponent, you can still go the submarauder route and just start ramming it with that big axe. But, let's be honest, the Marena does that way cheaper. Having this one sat in the backline as a sort of railgun turret, using its mag rail axe and 2 regular railguns, isn't the worst thing you can do for 194 points, because you actually have a great little backline defender against opposing submarauders, I should say. It also comes with magnetic generators, allowing you to shoot down enemy SRS as they come in, which is pretty neat. It also has giant slayers, and personally, speaking as somebody who mains Imperium, I absolutely loathe seeing these at the opposing end of the table, because with their railguns they actually pop my balloons like nothing else. The combination of the railgun along with sharpshooter, reducing the citadel even further when using, by another 2 points by the way, when shooting with the rails at aerial targets, means that scoring catastrophic hits on aerial units is quite easy to do for these Vitruvian Colossi, so they have a very unique position, I think, in the roster for the Commonwealth, and I really like the design of that game-wise as well, and I think the model just looks absolutely brilliant with that brutal axe too. And that role as a backfield defender is even bigger when you look at the Razres ability that they can have. It's a Valor effect, where you have to use a card of at least 30, but then any claw arc projectors can be used in the shooting phase in the fore arc to make an attack against the initial target within 10 inch using the Furnace Cascade weapon profile, which is that template weapon. So if you start getting swarmed by mass ones, these Kostroma Vitruvian Colossi are really going to be ideal weapons to counter that too, although it will need a Valor effect to do so. Next up we have 2 very unique flagships, quite often referred to lovingly as the Doom Donuts, the Murmansk Mobile Stronghold and the Tobolsk Mobile Stronghold. Now the Murmansk is the cheaper one of the 2, clocking in at 300 points, while the Tobolsk clocks in at 435. Now the Murmansk is the one that is cheapest because it doesn't really have that much firepower going for it, sadly. It does have 4 heavy gun batteries, but if you check out the arcs that come onto it, a max of 2 of them can be stacked together to fire at any one target, meaning even things like heavy firepower don't really come into their right when it comes to this ship. It does have heavy broadsides front and aft and port and starboard, meaning it can actually blast heavy broadsides in each direction. However, quite often it will be coming up through unexpected arrival, so that firepower will be good, but nothing exceptional, at least not for 300 points. What does make it exceptional though is the fact that it is by far the best defensive ship in the game when it comes to repairing. It has Advanced Repair Facility 5, meaning that it gets to make a repair roll due to its mass 5 of 10 dice, and it can apply that effect to both itself or friendly ships within 4 inch of it. And if you're lucky enough to roll an exploding hit during your repair roll, you can actually remove a point of battle damage, from hull damage, from a model within 4 inch or on itself. But each model can only have 1 hull point repaired per repair test, so even if you get very lucky and you roll like 3 of them, don't expect to repair 3 things at once. It does come with a bunch of other things that make it useful though, such as logistical support, giving you an extra card if you want to, and supply depot, meaning it can repair or refill rather those limited weapons such as the Katyusha rocket salvos as well, if you get within 4 inches of it. And with its large size, it's actually not that hard to get within 4 inches of it. However, moving it once it is in position is tricky though, because it has lumbering, meaning it can only drift 3 inches, and with a speed of 2 and turn limit of 2, you're not exactly going to be turning this thing on a dime. Once deployed, it's pretty much going to stay there. Another thing that you have to keep in mind is that you cannot deploy within 2 inches of any friendly terrain as well using unexpected arrival, and that gets tricky with a model with that large a footprint as well. So depending on the layout of your board, you might not be able to place it anywhere because of the way that the terrain is set up. It's definitely a fun model to experiment with, but even at its lower points cost, it's sort of hard to justify given how limited the amount of firepower is, and yeah, how clumsy it is to get up the board and move along with any ships as well along with it. The Tobolsk mobile stronghold definitely fixes some of these issues. The firepower is significantly more with 4 rocket batteries all aimed at the front, which is a good start because that means it can actually use the heavy firepower rule it has. The gun batteries have the same issues as the Murmansk, meaning that their afts do not line up all that well. However, there's a few other neat things it does have. The cryo generator and cryo capacitors means that if you deploy it aggressively enough, you will be using the blast in the next few turns, and tackling this ship in one go with mass 5 and ablative armor is going to be quite difficult. Also, with the magnetic generator and shield generator, its toughness is nothing to sneeze at. In addition, it comes with an SRS capacity of 5 and 3, meaning that it can start launching SRS nearby as well. And if you just deploy it further or far enough up the board, you're going to have, basically reach across the table with those 5 SRS tokens. In addition, this model can also take up to 4 nickel escort tokens for plus 8 points each, and that's not a dumb thing to do given how that it has the heavy broadsides that can be fired, and if you have escort tokens to them, you can add additional die to them. In addition, they do become good assault ships because of it, because that will bump it up to, well, I can't say phrase 16 because that's not technically how it works, but consider it a phrase 16 ship if you take the 4 extra nickel escort tokens on it. I'm not seeing a lot of these two though in most lists that I see rolling around on Discord, so if you're a Commonwealth player, let me know, what do you think about these two? Are you including them a lot to great effect, or are they basically sitting on the shelf looking pretty and not seeing action all that much? The Commonwealth also has access to immobile battle platforms rather than the mobile fortresses that aren't that mobile at all. The first one being the Khan heavy platform. This one has 3 heavy gun batteries, and again, it can only stack 2 of them on the same target, pretty much like the mobile fortresses can, but that's not the end of the world at only 160 points. Mind you, the armor and citadel values are laughably low for something with this points cost, so it can deploy quite far up, being a forward deployment unit, and it does have the heavy escort rule as well to add a bit of defense to ships around it as well, but you have to be careful that you don't deploy it too far ahead because it's a strategic asset, meaning if your opponent can knock it out during an assault phase, he is going to get victory points for it. However, if he doesn't, you are going to be the one getting victory points for it, so your opponent is highly likely to want to react to some of the fortresses you put down. And should you want to increase the amount of firepower, you can actually include an extra attached Mongolian platform for 55 points, which does give you those 3 gun batteries that will be able to fire in the same directions, because these come with heavy gun batteries with 360-degree firepower. The fun thing about it is you can also take just 3 of them in a squadron, giving you 3 heavy gun batteries that shoot in all directions as well, and you're not really losing out on the defensive stats either, so I think this is actually going to be a slightly better option than the Khan heavy platform. And I have mentioned it a few times already in this ORBAT deep dive. You often want a supply depot unit if you're using a lot of Katyusha rocket systems, and the Ortok offshore support platform basically offers you that. It comes equipped with 2 regular gun batteries shooting at 360-degree point angle and clocks in at 65 points each. And you can include more of them, but then we will be paying a 195 point unit for it. It's not the worst thing though, because they do come with advanced repair facilities, forward deployment and heavy escort, so when it comes to being defensive, that definitely is a useful thing to have. On top of that, you can do a bit of card shenanigans using useful freight. Useful freight allows you to look at the top card of your deck, and if you don't like what you're seeing, you can actually discard it. If you like what you're seeing, you can just place it back. However, that does mean that getting 3 of them can be a bit of a loss when it comes to useful freight, because if you flip the top card and it turns out to be good, well, there's no point in using the other 2 for useful freights again to just look at that card again and put it back. So there's a bit of a scaling issue with that one, but it's not the end of the world. What is slightly more annoying though is including these sometimes quite useful units into your fleet, because they do not have Russian keywords, they have Mongolian keywords, meaning that if you're using one of the nation specific battle fleets, you quite often cannot include them. We have seen some of the newest ORBATs coming with a specific fortification battle fleet, but unfortunately the Commonwealth doesn't have access to this one yet in 3.04, and there's actually one other small thing you have to remember. This is a very complete ORBAT, there aren't really any unreleased models in here, so we don't know what's coming up with the Russians. We do know that there is an aim to update these ORBATs every 6 months for all of the factions at the same time, with intermediate, smaller updates, but mostly for unreleased units or models that are about to be released. And there's also a bit more of a surprise to see what is coming up as well. Now, to see what is coming up next for the Commonwealth, there was this gem dropped a couple of weeks ago by Stuart from Warcradle Studios, which are the Polish-Lithuanian airships. Right now, the Russian roster, well, I should say the Commonwealth roster, isn't really big on a lot of flying units, but that seems to change if these guys are going to come up. And looking at this ship, it has 1 heavy gun battery and then 3 smaller ones, so it is a bit reminiscent of some of the French skimming units as well in terms of firepower. So I'm quite curious to see if we're talking about a Mass 2 ship. From the sizes of it does seem to be a Mass 2 ship, but it looks like that can be an awful lot of firepower if this artwork is going to be used directly. And to be honest, with that winged hussar look on the wings, I think this looks absolutely gorgeous, and I can't wait to get my hands on them if they do get released. So yeah, looks like everything in the ORBAT is actually released for the Commonwealth, but you do have some fun things to look forward to in the future. That is it for me for today though. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for when these other ORBAT updates are going to be released. And of course, if you want to see cool things like reviews from different articles from Warcradle Studios and to see the latest news on their releases as well. I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, bye!